really love the idea that you started talking about that values are not actually about, it's almost like values are not actually about me and my experience, but living a values based life actually becomes about our experience. And I think it's easy enough to approach values like, oh, if I live from my values, my life gets better. And like, that's true. But I think the big shift here is now when I live from my values, our lives get better.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, a huge shift, because I think the word values gets used more often than not, I think points to this like toe the line kind of thing. You better act by these values so I know
Mhm.
I have a group to fit in with,
Yeah.
kind of thing, which is like totally backwards. It's like, if there's a group that says enough people that say they believe in this value or these values, and then I say I believe that, then I'm a part of that thing and I know who I am. I think we kind of bypass like actually finding out who we are.
Yeah.
Whereas if we look at it from a different perspective and see values as a means to make the world around me, but my values make the world around me better, your values make the world around you better, all of our values make the world a better place, then all of a sudden it's not directly about me, but also I have to do I have to do the work. Like I have to figure out who I am. I
Yeah.
have to know about me. I have to be willing to like go there and do that. And I can understand on one hand how that is potentially scary. Like I don't want to. No thanks. It's easier not to, you know.
Right. Yeah.
It may be easier not to, but it's way better when we do.
Yeah.
It's way better when we do. And it's
Well,
not better just for us, but better for everybody.
and I think this also brings up, and I think that's something that we talked about before, that if our values, if what we're living from or what we're doing in the world is marginalizing, hurting people, then we have to take a look at those or
Yeah.
get new values. And so I think this is not a blanket permission for our values to steamroll everyone else. And so I think that I always have to bring that up in these conversations because I think that we do have people, there are situations, and I've done it, and we've all done it, where we've lived or acted or interacted in a certain way that we thought was from a value, something that's important to us. And then we realize, oh, wait, but that is actually harming someone else. And so then that's the opportunity for us to take a look at those spaces, because this conversation of living from our values, and just like we don't create in a vacuum, we don't live from our values in a vacuum, because our values have to be in relation to something, right?
Right.
Without that
Yep.
relationship out there, there's not a value to live from, because you're living from this space out to this space. So there is this in relationship to, whether that's individuals, whether that's the planet, whether that, I mean, all the things, our experiences of life. Um, so I think the call is to really look at how what the spaces we're living from, the things, the belief systems, the value systems we're living from, and really to take a close, honest look. Are those beliefs and values negatively impacting anyone in our sphere or the world in general, or even creating a consciousness that is not what we want to see in the world? And this is not a criticism. We all have shown up in those spaces, and we all do, and we're going to. But I think the conversation is becoming more aware when we do. That way we can self-correct or reevaluate um, in quicker time.
Right.
For my own self, I mean,
Yeah.
there are definitely times where I show up and I'm like, oh, wait, that's not necessarily how I wanted to show up. And that could be harmful to someone. And begin to think, ask the question and wonder what that's about. What's underneath? Where is that coming from? What truth can I um, blueprint on to that underlying or old belief, and then begin to live from those spaces? And I think that's what it really means about using our values to actually transform our lives and the lives of those around us.
Yeah.
It's not saying these are my values, one and done, let's go. and hit the road. Our values are not static, but the more that we understand our interaction with the world around us, the more that we can begin to shift and move and make changes and new awarenesses and new expansions um, to this. And that's the transformative effect
Yeah.
of our values, is being able to engage in those conversations and those like self inquiry sorts of things.
And I think then what happens is we get to create space for others who are living like the toe the line values. I think it creates space for for a more open conversation. What I think is pretty common is we learn, I mean this part's not common, this part is universal. We learn things as kids that we carry with us into adulthood, and then a lot of which needs to be unlearned because whether they were coping mechanisms as kids or whether it was just incorrect facts, or we learned something that was taught as truth then and is now debunked, and now we know more, we know better, or whatever. I think there's all kinds of stuff, but we have these like traditional values that get taught along with that are seemingly ancient at this point, right? I mean, they're like values that go back centuries, and yet there's a tendency to hold tight to them. And if we don't do that personal healing stuff, the work to look at the things, the hurt from childhood or the default thinking from childhood that we never went back and looked through, until we do that, we kind of, our beliefs, our thoughts, and what we've learned go hand in hand with those values because they came up together. you
Yeah.
know the default thinking, the hurt that's looking to be healed, and the values are all kind of like intertwined. And so until we start to look into the default thinking, look into the default beliefs, look into the hurt from childhood, or the coping mechanisms from childhood, the things that were necessary or the things that we learned, until we look into that, we are stuck with those default beliefs. And so it becomes really like integrated into someone's identity,
Yeah.
because calling out that value is like poking at that wound, right? And
Yeah.
so it's necessary to look into healing those things so that we can separate our identity from those values, separate the experiences of the past from those values, and even those experiences from our identity, and realize like, oh, I am not my history, even though history is part of my journey. I am not those values, even though I can have values. I may choose those, or I may choose other ones. But I think it's so necessary to do the work. And so when we collectively do the work and create spaces where it's okay to have individualized values that then benefit others, rather than having group values that not only don't benefit the group but also harm me,
Yeah.
right? Because I think that's really what we're looking at. It's like,
Yeah.
I can have values that benefit everyone, or I can take on values that already exist that don't actually help anybody. But it just gets so tied into that identity thing. So I think, to me, that's like the massive benefit of any one of us doing the work and then leaning into values, because values that actually help me are actually going to help other people. And then we get that's a space now for other people to come in and do that same thing. I think if I could give like one message to the world, it would be like, it's okay to come, like do that work. Like, it's okay to have this conversation, even
Yeah.
even though this conversation probably goes against
Yeah.
those that group toe the line value system.
If you ever wonder, this is just for me, but if I ever wonder what are still some underlying default things, like I can be on a spiritual path and think that you've gotten past some of the things, but in a moment of challenge, in a moment of uncertainty, in a moment of crazy chaos, whatever's going on, boom, I can switch back into those things and be like, where in the world am I? And so I think that to take that to a more sort of collective view, is if we look at our world in things that create challenges and chaos and uncertainty, and then we look at how we respond to the challenge, the chaos, and the uncertainty.
Yeah.
Those responses often, not always, but often can bring up these default things because that's what happens when we don't know what to do. We just go to what we've known. And that could be a space we don't want to be in anymore or whatever. And so I think on a collective level, I think maybe that's why we're seeing a lot of the things we're seeing now is this unwillingness to sit in the discomfort. And it's bringing up all of these default ways of being and responding and interacting that we thought, man, I thought that was like back in the day. And why is it so
Mm,
blown up
yeah.
today? And I think that
Yeah.
can be some of it is that those default beliefs, those default values, those like ingrained in us things are still there. And so this gives an opportunity for us collectively to create spaces where we can begin to like not be critical of one another because of our default responses, but to be like, wow, what's that about? Can we work together to kind of like see what is underneath this? And then how can we support one another in actually shifting those defaults? And then creating these spaces where it's okay to be uncomfortable or where it's even safe to be uncomfortable. And so I think that also is the power of this kind of understanding of values on this kind of collective level, because we're seeing it in the world.
Yeah.
And so when we can actually begin to collectively explore these default systems, frameworks, all the things, then we could be like, oh man, that's what that's about. All right, we know what to do now. And we can begin to like, hit that one real hard. And then it shifts our kind of like collective experience.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's I don't know, for me, that's the thing. That's the point that we're not just doing this work now. Like I'm not just doing this work now for me.
Hmm.
I'm doing this work now for people 100 years from now.
Yep.
Right. So like you want to think about what your legacy is going to be. What work are you doing now for you, for the people around you that creates that new default? Imagine if we were each born with a default thinking that worked in our favor for our benefit automatically from day one. And I think that's yes, we're trying to make the world better for us now, for those around us now, for those around us in 5 years and 10 years in our lifetime. And
Yeah.
we're also doing work now for 100 years from now, 200 years from now, for there to literally be a new way of being.
And that can be our collective legacy.
Yeah.
And
Talk about transformative.
yeah, I just get so excited talking about the power of possibility, the power of really transforming the world around us and how we can collectively do that by embracing our collective values and actually activating them and using them to transform not only our experience, but the world around us. And that's kind of our jam here at Soul Evolution Collaborative. That's our vision. How can we take the things that we hold dear, the spiritual truths that we hold dear, and actually begin to use them in a practical way to actually change not only our lives, but the lives of everyone, so that everyone can show up authentically. Everyone has a space to belong. Everyone can uh, self actualize in the way that they were meant to do. And so, if this is your jam too, we would love for you to continue this conversation with you on Thursdays. The gathering is an opportunity for us to dive a little bit deeper into this conversation and share of our own experiences. And so you can find all that information to sign up on our website, soulevolutioncollaborative.org. You can also find on our website all the things that are going on at SEC. Like I said, this is our jam to really create these spaces in our world for these types of conversations. And so jump on over to our website, check out all the events. There's so many things going on and so many ways to get involved. And so if we don't see you on Thursday or any of the other events, we will definitely see you back here next week at Truth Be Told 2.0.